learning window. Defining a relative clause. A relative clause tells us which person or thing or what kind of person or thing the speaker means. It is normally introduced by relative pronouns like who, which, that, whose, whom, and relative adverbs like when and where. An adjective clause is also called a relative clause. Use of who. A. We use who in a relative clause when we are talking about people, not things. Examples: the little boy who sat next to me on the coach ate sweets all the time. Sarah is the woman who owns that lovely cottage. B. Sometimes we can use that instead of who, but it is less usual. Examples: Prabhat is the boy that plays the guitar in the school band. The lady that lived here before us was an ardent gardener. Use of which, that. We use that and which when we refer to things, not people. Examples: I know of a bakery that, which, sells delicious muffins and cupcakes. Where are the documents that, which, were lying on the table? Use of that. That can normally be used in place of both who and which. However, in specific cases, we have to use that. A. We use that after adjectives in the superlative degree. Examples: he was one of the best motivational speakers that spoke on the power of positive thinking. This is the best resource that I've ever read. B. We use that after the words all, any, anything, none, and nothing. Examples: this is all that I desire. Is there anything that I can do to make you happy? C. If we needed a word to refer to both a person and a thing, we would use that. Example: both the lady and her vintage car that was shown in the picture belonged to the 70s. Defining and non-defining relative clauses. There are two types of relative clauses. Let us look at the relative clauses highlighted in these sentences to understand the two types. Type 1, Type 2. The woman who lives next door to Simran is rather weird. Mrs. Taylor, who lives next door to Simran, is rather weird. We stayed at the bed and breakfast, which Malika had recommended. We stayed at Violet Hill Bed and Breakfast, which Malika had recommended. In Type 1, the relative clause tells us which person or thing or what kind of person or thing the speaker is talking about. The clause who lives next door to Simran tells us which woman. The clause which Malika had recommended tells us which bed and breakfast. Without the relative clause, the sentence would be incomplete. The woman is rather weird makes sense only if we know which woman. This type or relative clause is called a defining clause. In Type 2, the relative clause does not tell us which person or thing the speaker means. We already know which person or thing is meant: Mrs. Taylor, Violet Hill Bed and Breakfast. Hence, these clauses give extra information about something which is already identified or known. The clause who lives next door to Simran adds information about Mrs. Taylor. But we can say the sentence on its own without the relative clause. Mrs. Taylor is rather weird makes sense because the name Mrs. Taylor identifies who we are talking about. This type of relative clause is called a non-defining clause. Differentiating between defining and non-defining relative clauses. A. We do not use commas with defining clauses. Examples: I know a person who has a huge shell collection. The painting which was damaged is worth thousands of pounds. However, non-defining clauses are set off by commas. Instead of commas, we can use brackets or dashes. If the adding clause is at the end of the sentence, we need only one comma or dash. Examples: meet my friend Pippi, who has a huge shell collection. The famous painting which was damaged during the war is worth thousands of pounds. B. In defining clauses, we can use that in place of who or which. Examples: we'll dine at a restaurant which or that serves only organic food. We're looking for someone who or that holds a marketing degree. However, in non-defining clauses, we cannot use that. Examples: We'll dine at Melissa's, which, not that, serves only organic food. Anamika, who, not that, holds a marketing degree, is working as a manager in this company. C. In defining clauses, we can leave out who or which or that when it is the object. Examples: we need someone whom we can trust and turn for counsel. The restaurant, which you suggested, served only organic food. In these sentences, we can leave out whom and which. However, in non-defining clauses, we cannot leave out who or which. Examples: we've employed Anamika, whom we can trust and turn for counsel. We cannot write we've employed Anamika, we can trust and turn for counsel. Melissa's restaurant, which you suggested, served only organic food. We cannot write Melissa's restaurant, you suggested, served only organic food.